All right, let's talk about a grammar crime you've probably been taught to fear your entire life. It's this one rule that's been haunting students and writers for literally centuries. I'm almost certain you've heard it, and maybe you've even had a paper marked up for breaking it. But what if I told you the whole thing is, well, completely fake?
You might have seen this quote before. It's often pinned on Winston Churchill, and it just perfectly captures how ridiculous this so-called rule can be. The story goes he said this to an editor who'd corrected him, twisting his sentence into this pretzel of grammar, just to avoid ending it with a preposition. It's the perfect setup for the absurdity we're about to dive into. So that's the big question, isn't it? Is this rule we all got taught in school, this law against ending a sentence with words like to, with, in, or for, is it even a real rule at all? Well, spoiler alert, the answer is probably not what you think. Okay, let's play detective. To really get to the bottom of this mystery, we've got to jump in our time machine. We need to go way back and figure out where this whole idea even came from and who decided the rest of us had to follow it. So check this out. It all started back in 1672 with a poet named John Dryden. He just didn't like the sound of ending sentences with prepositions. That's it. It was just his personal taste. But then, fast forward about 100 years, and a grammarian, Robert Loth, takes this personal pet peeve and puts it in his super popular grammar book as a hard and fast rule. And just like that, it became gospel, a myth that, amazingly, is still hanging around today. So why? Why did they even do this? Well, the main motivation was something we can call Latin envy. Seriously. See, back in the 17th and 18th centuries, Latin was seen as the peak of language. It was logical, prestigious, the whole deal. And in Latin, you literally can't end a sentence with a preposition. So these grammarians thought, hey, if we make English act more like Latin, it'll be more respectable. They were basically trying to force English into a fancy but super uncomfortable Latin tuxedo. It just didn't fit. And this chart really breaks it down. You've got the old prescriptive claim on one side versus what's actually true on the other. They wanted English to be like Latin, but here's the thing. English isn't a Latin language. It's a Germanic language. And for us, leaving a preposition at the end of a sentence is completely natural. What they called ungraceful is often just how we talk. And what they called a rigid rule is really just a persistent myth. Okay, so let's move on to the evidence for the defense. We're going to see how the English language itself proves its own innocence. We'll look at the actual mechanics of our language to see why ending a sentence with a preposition isn't just okay, it's a core part of how English works. So this so-called crime actually has an official name, preposition stranding. It sounds technical, but it's simple. It's just what happens when you ask a question like, who are you talking to? The word who moves to the front, and to is left stranded at the end. Far from being a mistake, linguists see this as a totally normal, totally grammatical part of our language's DNA.
And this comparison just makes it so clear. On the left, you have natural, everyday English. Who did you give that to? Simple. On the right, you have the super formal alternative, which has this ridiculous name, Pied Piping. Yeah, like the Pied Piper. The idea is the preposition to has to drag its object whom along with it to the front. One sounds like a real person talking, the other sounds like you're testifying in a 19th century courtroom.
And here it is. This is the smoking gun. You've probably heard someone do this, right? They're trying to sound really formal, so they say something like, to whom did you give that to? That little mistake is actually powerful proof. It shows that our brains are so hardwired to strand that preposition that we stick it on the end anyway, even when we're trying our best not to. Okay, so myth officially busted. We can all relax and stop worrying about this fake rule. And now we can finally start appreciating what these tiny little words actually do. And it turns out they are some of the most powerful, hardworking words in the entire English language. Think about it. These little phrases, in the park, with a smile, on the table, they're like masters of disguise. They don't just point to things. They're secretly moonlighting as adjectives and adverbs, adding all these crucial layers of detail that really make our sentences come alive. So let's break down their two main gigs. First, a prepositional phrase can act like an adjective. It can describe a noun. In the cat in the middle, the phrase tells us which cat we're talking about. But it can also act like an adverb, describing a verb. He ran in the park tells us where he ran. Same kind of phrase, two totally different jobs. So cool. Now, this is where it gets really fun. Because these phrases are so flexible, they can sometimes create some confusing or just plain funny sentences. Take this one. She saw the tourist with the binoculars. Seems pretty straightforward, right? But there's a little puzzle hiding in there. So, who has the binoculars? Does the tourist have them? In that case, with the binoculars is an adjective describing the tourist. Or did she use the binoculars to see him? In that case, it's an adverb describing how she saw. It can mean two completely different things, and it all hinges on the secret job of that one little phrase. But the story here goes way deeper than just grammar rules and puzzles. It turns out that prepositions are fundamentally tied to the way our brains actually map and understand the world. This is where things get really fascinating. So there's this concept in cognitive science called image schemas. It sounds complex, but the idea is simple. They're like basic mental blueprints that we build just from living in a physical body. Concepts like being inside a container or moving along a path. Prepositions are the words that act as a bridge between that physical world and our more abstract thoughts.
Let's just follow the journey of one single word, over. Okay, so it starts as a totally physical path, right? The plane flew over the city. Simple. Then our brain makes a little leap. That idea of a path across something extends to mean covering. He put a blanket over the child. From there, being physically higher becomes a metaphor for dominance. She has control over the project. And then, moving along that path becomes a metaphor for time. Over the last week. Isn't that amazing? One simple physical idea lets our brain map all these complex abstract concepts. So, what have we learned? Let's recap. Number 1, that old rule about not ending a sentence with a preposition, it's a total myth, born from some serious Latin envy. Number 2, preposition stranding is a completely natural, essential part of how English works. And finally, these tiny words are linguistic heavy lifters. They're powerful modifiers that even help our brains connect our physical world to our most abstract thoughts.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty big question to chew on. If our simplest words for where things are, words like in, on, and over, can actually build the foundation for abstract thoughts like time and control, well, what other hidden structures in our language are quietly shaping the way we all see the world? It's something to think about.